The wagon lurched to a stop at the edge of Del Rio, Texas, and Dorothy Daniels realized with sinking certainty that her husband was never coming back. She sat there for a moment longer, 3 pairs of eyes watching her from the wagon bed, waiting for her to tell them what happened next. 7-year-old Samuel, 5-year-old Margaret, and 3-year-old baby Thomas, all sun-browned and dust-covered, all depending entirely on her. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Marcus had left them 3 days ago, promising he would return with supplies from town. But when Dorothy had finally accepted he was gone for good, she found only $15 hidden in their small trunk, the wagon, 2 horses, and their meager belongings. The August heat of 1878 beat down mercilessly as Dorothy climbed down from the wagon seat. Her calico dress, once a cheerful yellow pattern, now faded to something closer to dirty cream, hung loose on her thin frame. She had not eaten properly in weeks, always making sure the children got the larger portions. At 24 years old, she felt ancient, used up, discarded like so much trash on the side of the road. Del Rio sprawled before her, a collection of wooden buildings and dirt streets near the Mexican border. It was not much, but it was civilization. She had pushed the horses hard to reach it, terrified of being stranded in the open country with 3 small children and no protection. "Mama, I am hungry," Thomas whimpered from the back. "I know, sweet boy. We will find something soon." Dorothy's voice cracked despite her efforts to sound confident. She walked the horses forward slowly, drawing stares from the townspeople. A woman alone with children in a battered wagon was either a widow or abandoned, and neither status inspired much charity in a hard town like Del Rio. Dorothy kept her chin up, refusing to show the fear clawing at her insides. The general store seemed like the most logical place to start. She tied the horses to the hitching post and lifted Thomas down, then helped Margaret while Samuel scrambled down on his own, trying to be the man of the family already. Inside, the store owner, a portly man with suspicious eyes, watched her count out coins for flour, beans, and a small portion of salt pork. "That husband of yours coming back?" he asked bluntly. "That is none of your concern," Dorothy replied, gathering her purchases. "It is if you are planning to stay in Del Rio without means of support. We do not need more charity cases." The words stung, but Dorothy refused to let them show. She herded the children back outside, her mind racing. Where would they sleep tonight? The $15 would not last more than a week if she was careful, maybe 2 if she was exceptionally frugal. She had no family, no friends in this town, no prospects for work that would allow her to keep the children with her. The livery stable seemed the only option for shelter. At least the horses needed tending, and perhaps she could negotiate sleeping in the loft. As she guided the wagon down the main street, a cowboy on a large roan horse rode past, then suddenly pulled up short and turned around. Dorothy kept walking, used to men staring, usually with less than honorable intentions. But this man dismounted and walked his horse alongside her wagon at a respectful distance. "Pardon me, madam," he said, his voice deeper than she expected, with a hint of concern rather than the predatory interest she had learned to recognize. "Are you lost?" "No, thank you. I know where I am going," Dorothy lied. "Because you have been sitting at the edge of town for near an hour before coming in. I noticed when I was riding back from checking my fence lines." Dorothy stopped walking and really looked at him for the first time. He was tall, probably in his late 20s, with dark hair that needed cutting and steady gray eyes that seemed genuinely kind. His clothes were worn but clean, his boots well made if scuffed. Everything about him suggested a working cowboy who took care of what he had. "I apologize for concerning you. "We are just passing through," she said. "Are you now?" "Passing through to where?" Dorothy opened her mouth to spin another lie but found she could not. The weight of the past 3 days, the terror and exhaustion and bone-deep betrayal, suddenly crashed over her. To her absolute horror, tears began streaming down her face. "Mama!" Samuel's voice was frightened. The cowboy moved closer, his expression shifting to alarm. "Madam, I did not mean to upset you. Please let me help. My name is Caleb Armstrong. I have a ranch about 3 miles north of town. Nothing fancy, but it is solid and there is plenty of room." "I do not need charity," Dorothy managed to choke out, even as she wiped desperately at her tears. "I am not offering charity. I am offering work if you are willing. My cook left 2 months ago to get married, and I have been living on burnt bacon and hard biscuits ever since. I can pay fair wages, and there is a separate cabin where you and the children could stay." Dorothy stared at him, trying to determine if this was real or some kind of cruel trick. "You do not know me. You do not know anything about me. I know you are scared and alone with 3 young ones. I know you have been crying, and I am guessing whoever brought you out here is not coming back. I know Del Rio is not kind to women without protection, and I know I have more space than I need and could use the help. That seems like enough to start with. Why would you do this?" The question came out as barely a whisper. Caleb was quiet for a moment, his hand absently stroking his horse's neck. "My mother raised me and my 2 sisters alone after my father died. I was 8. I remember what it looked like when people turned away from her, and I remember the one family who did not. I suppose I am paying that forward." Something in his voice told Dorothy he was telling the truth. She looked at her children, at Thomas slumped against Samuel's side, at Margaret's hollow cheeks, at Samuel's 2 serious eyes. She thought about the $15, the suspicious store owner, the long Texas nights in a wagon with 3 frightened children. "What would the job entail?" she asked carefully. "Cooking, mostly. I have 2 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse. Some cleaning, though I am not particular about that. Garden tending if you are inclined. I run cattle, so I am gone during the day, but I am back most evenings. The cabin has 2 rooms, a stove, a decent well nearby. You would have privacy and safety. And what would you expect in return? Beyond the cooking, I mean." Dorothy forced herself to meet his eyes to make clear she understood how these arrangements sometimes worked. Caleb's face flushed red. "Nothing, madam. I promise you that on my honor. You would have a bolt on your door, and I would never set foot inside without invitation. I am talking about honest work for honest wages, nothing more." Dorothy studied him for a long moment. She had been married for 8 years to a man who had seemed kind at first too, who had courted her properly and made promises he had no intention of keeping. Marcus had seemed like a good choice right up until he started disappearing for days at a time, gambling away their money, and finally abandoning them entirely in the middle of hostile territory. Her judgment of men was clearly questionable, but what choice did she have? She could refuse Caleb's offer and try to make it in Del Rio on her own, but that would last 2 weeks at most before she was destitute. She could try to reach another town, but the horses were already exhausted and she had no guarantee anywhere else would be better. Or she could take a chance on this stranger with kind eyes and a convincing story. $2 a week plus room and board, she heard herself say, and I keep the cabin door bolted at night. $3 a week, Caleb countered. And you can bolt every door and window if it makes you feel safer. I will introduce you to the hands before we leave town, so you know who is supposed to be on the property. My nearest neighbor is the widow Patterson, about 2 miles east. She would vouch for my character if you want to speak with her. That will not be necessary." Dorothy did not have the energy for more investigation. If this was a mistake, she would deal with it, but at least her children would have solid food in their bellies first. When would we start? Now, if you are willing. You all look like you could use a good meal and a safe place to sleep. I will drive your wagon, and one of you can ride with me to give the horses a break. Samuel immediately perked up. Can I ride with you, Mr. Armstrong? Caleb smiled at him. If your mother says it is acceptable. Dorothy wanted to refuse, to keep all her children close, but Samuel was looking at her with more hope than she had seen in his eyes in months. Stay in the wagon bed where I can see you, she said finally. The ride to Caleb's ranch took about 40 minutes. The land was rough and dry, covered in mesquite and prickly pear, with the occasional cottonwood marking a creek bed. Dorothy kept her eyes on Samuel, who sat in the back of the wagon pointing out things to Caleb, who answered each question with patience. The ranch house came into view first, a low structure of stone and wood that looked solidly built. Near it stood a barn, a bunkhouse, several corrals, and a smaller cabin set slightly apart from the other buildings. Everything was well maintained, the fences straight, the buildings in good repair. It spoke of a man who took pride in his property. The cabin is there, Caleb said, pointing to the smaller structure. I cleaned it out when my cook left, hoping to hire someone new so it should be ready. Let me help you get settled, and then I will make some introductions. The cabin was simple but clean, with a main room containing a small stove, a table, 2 chairs and a rocking chair, and a smaller bedroom with a large bed frame and mattress. There were pegs on the walls for hanging clothes, a shelf for dishes, and windows with real glass panes. I know it is not much, Caleb said, setting down the trunk he had carried in. But it is sound. Roof does not leak and the stove draws well. It is more than enough, Dorothy said honestly. It was better than anything they had lived in for the past 2 years, since Marcus had dragged them from town to town chasing schemes that never materialized. The necessary is out back, about 20 yards. Water pump is between here and the main house. I will bring over some firewood and get you started with supplies. Tomorrow we can work out the details of meals and such, but for tonight, just rest. I have some stew left from yesterday that is edible if you are hungry. We would be grateful for anything, Dorothy said. Caleb nodded and left, and Dorothy finally allowed herself to sit down on one of the chairs. The children explored the cabin with growing excitement, Margaret claiming the rocking chair with a delighted laugh, Thomas toddling after Samuel as he investigated every corner. "Mama, there is a real bed," Samuel called from the bedroom. "A big one. We will all fit," Dorothy said, though her mind was already working on how to construct pallets on the floor. The children could share the bed and she would manage with blankets. Caleb returned with an armload of wood, followed by a young Mexican man carrying a crate of supplies. "This is Diego, one of my hands," Caleb said. "Diego, this is Mrs. Daniels and her children." Diego nodded respectfully. "Welcome, Senora. It's good to have someone to cook again." Caleb, he tries, but he made a face that made Margaret giggle. "It is not that bad," Caleb protested. "It is worse," Diego said cheerfully. "The other hand, Jim, he is checking cattle. You meet him tomorrow. He is old, talks too much, but he is harmless." Dorothy felt something in her chest loosen slightly. Diego's easy manner and Caleb's comfortable response suggested this was indeed a normal working ranch, not whatever she had feared in her darker moments. After Diego left, Caleb showed her how the stove worked, though Dorothy was already familiar with that type. He brought over a pot of stew that was, as promised, edible if uninspired, along with some bread that was only slightly burnt. "I will leave you to settle in," he said. "If you need anything, the main house is right there. I sleep light, so do not worry about waking me if there is trouble." "Mr. Armstrong," Dorothy said as he reached the door. "Thank you, truly." He turned and gave her a smile that transformed his serious face into something younger and more open. "You are welcome, Mrs. Daniels. I think this will work out well for both of us." After he left, Dorothy bolted the door and fed her children. They ate like they were starving, which they nearly were, and she forced herself to eat too, despite her churning stomach. Then she washed them as best she could with water from the pump and put them to bed, all three in the large bed, snuggled together like puppies. She sat in the rocking chair as darkness fell, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. Cattle lowing in the distance, horses shifting in the corrals, the wind in the mesquite trees. For the first time in 3 days, she let herself feel something other than terror. She cried quietly, mourning the death of her marriage, mourning her own foolishness in believing Marcus's promises, mourning the loss of the life she had thought they would have. But underneath the grief was something else, something small and fragile but growing stronger: hope. The next morning, Dorothy woke before dawn, a habit from years of rising early. The children were still sleeping, so she slipped out quietly and used the necessary, then splashed cold water on her face from the pump. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten, painting the rough landscape in shades of purple and gold. She found Caleb already up, working in the barn. He looked surprised to see her. "You did not have to start so early," he said. "Take time to settle in." "I prefer to be useful," Dorothy replied. "What time do you normally eat breakfast?" "Whenever I get around to it. Usually sunup, more or less." "Then I should get started. What do you have for supplies?" Caleb showed her the larder in his house, which was better stocked than she expected. Flour, cornmeal, bacon, dried beans, some withered potatoes, coffee, sugar, and various other staples. She could work with this. "I ride into town every week or so for supplies," Caleb said. "Just let me know what you need." Dorothy started breakfast while Caleb finished in the barn. She made biscuits, fried bacon and eggs, and strong coffee. It was simple food but prepared well, and when Caleb and the 2 ranch hands sat down at the table in the main house, she saw their faces light up. "I think I have died and gone to heaven," Jim said. He was indeed old, probably 60, with a weathered face and kind blue eyes. "Actual biscuits that are not rocks." "I told you she was a good cook," Caleb said, though he had no way of knowing that. He was just being kind. Dorothy felt heat rise in her cheeks at the praise. She had the children eating at the cabin, not wanting to impose them on the meal, but Caleb noticed. "Bring your young ones over for meals," he said. "No sense cooking twice." "They can be loud," Dorothy warned. "This house has been too quiet for too long," Caleb replied. "I mean it, bring them." So she did, and Samuel peppered the men with questions about cattle and horses and ranching, while Margaret charmed them all with her smile, and Thomas sat on Dorothy's lap and stared wide-eyed at everything. The days fell into a rhythm. Dorothy rose early, made breakfast, cleaned up, and then worked on other tasks. She discovered a neglected garden plot and began rehabilitating it, planting late-season vegetables from seeds Caleb bought in town. She washed clothes and mended torn shirts and darned socks. She cooked 3 solid meals a day, and slowly the gaunt look faded from everyone's faces, including her own. The children thrived. Samuel followed the men around when they were near the house, learning about horses and leather working and all the tasks of ranch life. Margaret discovered a half-wild barn cat and her kittens and appointed herself their caretaker. Thomas simply soaked up the attention and security, losing the frightened look that had haunted his baby face, and Dorothy watched Caleb. She could not help it. After Marcus's betrayal, she had thought herself done with men entirely, but Caleb was different from any man she had known. He was quiet but not cold, strong but gentle, especially with the children. He never raised his voice, never drank to excess, never made her feel unsafe or uncomfortable. He was patient with Samuel's endless questions, even after long days working cattle. He carved a small wooden horse for Thomas and a doll for Margaret without being asked. He fixed the rocking chair when it developed a squeak and built a bench for outside the cabin so Dorothy could sit in the evenings. "You do not have to do all this," Dorothy protested when he brought over a small bookshelf he had built. "I know," Caleb said. "I want to. You have made this place feel like a home again. It is the least I can do." Dorothy did not know what to say to that. She accepted the bookshelf, which Caleb filled with books from his own collection. She discovered he was educated, which surprised her. Most cowboys she had known could barely write their names. "My mother insisted on schooling," he explained when she commented on it. "She said just because we were poor did not mean we had to be ignorant. She taught all of us to read and write and do figures. My sisters both became teachers." "Where are they now?" Dorothy asked. It was evening, and she was shelling peas on the bench outside the cabin while the children played nearby. Caleb had stopped by on his way back from checking the water tanks. "One is in San Antonio, married to a banker. The other is in Austin, married to a lawyer. They did well for themselves." There was pride in his voice, but also something else, loneliness perhaps. "And your mother, she passed 4 years ago, fever." Caleb's voice went quiet. "I inherited this place from my uncle, her brother. Moved out here to start fresh." "You like it? Ranching, I mean." "I do. It is hard work but honest. The land does not lie to you. You put in effort and you get results. Not always the results you want, but at least you know where you stand." He paused, then added, "Though it can be lonely." "That is the hard part." Dorothy understood loneliness. She had been lonely in her marriage, lonely in the wagon traveling through empty country, lonely even in her own skin sometimes. But here, on this ranch with this quiet man and his small crew, she felt less lonely than she had in years. "I should let you get back to the children," Caleb said, standing up. "I just wanted to check that everything was going well." "It is," Dorothy said, "better than well. I cannot remember the last time I felt this settled." Caleb smiled at her, that transformative smile that made her heart do strange things in her chest. "Good. I am glad." After he left, Dorothy sat thinking about that smile and about the way her pulse had quickened when he looked at her. It was too soon, she told herself. Far too soon to be feeling anything like attraction. Her husband had only been gone a month. She should still be in mourning, even if the marriage had been dead long before Marcus left. But she could not help noticing the way Caleb's hands looked when he was working with leather, strong and capable. Or the way his voice softened when he spoke to the children. Or the way he always seemed to know when she needed help without making her feel weak for needing it. She was falling for him, she realized with a jolt. Falling for a man who had shown her nothing but kindness, who had saved her and her children from destitution, who made her feel safe for the first time in longer than she could remember. The question was what to do about it. September arrived, bringing slightly cooler temperatures, though still hot by any reasonable standard. Dorothy had been on the ranch for nearly a month, and life had settled into comfortable patterns. She woke early, prepared meals, tended her garden, and in the quiet moments between tasks, she found herself seeking out Caleb's company. It started innocently enough. She would bring him coffee while he worked on tack repairs. He would help her carry water for the garden. They would sit together in the evening after the children were in bed, talking about nothing important and everything at once. Dorothy learned that Caleb had served briefly in the army, that he loved thunderstorms, that he had once wanted to be a school teacher like his sisters, but could not stand being indoors all day. Caleb learned that Dorothy had grown up on a small farm in Missouri, that she loved reading poetry, that she had married Marcus at 16 because her parents had died and she had nowhere else to go. "You were so young," Caleb said when she told him this. They were sitting on the porch of the main house, watching the stars come out. The children were asleep in the cabin, and Diego and Jim had gone into town for the evening. "Too young," Dorothy agreed. "I thought I loved him, but I think I just loved the idea of being safe again, of having someone to depend on. And he let you down, spectacularly." Dorothy tried to keep her voice light, but bitterness crept in anyway. "I kept thinking if I was just a better wife, if I tried harder, he would settle down, but he did not want to settle. He wanted adventure and excitement and new schemes, and we were just weights holding him back." "He was a fool," Caleb said quietly. "Anyone who could leave you and those children is a damned fool." Dorothy looked at him, at his serious face in the starlight, and felt her breath catch. "Caleb," she started, then did not know how to continue. "I know it is too soon," he said, not looking at her. "I know you are still healing from what he did, but I need you to know that I care for you, Dorothy, not just as my cook or someone I am helping. I care for you as a woman, as a person. And I am willing to wait as long as it takes for you to be ready to care back if you ever are." Dorothy's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I do care," she whispered. "I care more than I should, more than is probably wise. I am still married, legally. And I have 3 children and more problems than any sensible man would want to take on." "I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow," Caleb said, finally turning to meet her eyes. "I am just asking if maybe, someday, you might want to try, to see if this feeling between us could be something more." "Yes," Dorothy said, the word escaping before she could think better of it. "Yes, I would like to try." Caleb reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused, his grip gentle but firm. They sat there for a long time, hands clasped, watching the stars wheel overhead, and Dorothy felt something inside her that had been locked tight for years begin to open. The courtship that followed was slow and sweet. Caleb continued to be a perfect gentleman, never pushing for more than Dorothy was ready to give. They held hands. They sat close together. He kissed her once softly under the cottonwood tree by the creek, and Dorothy thought her heart might burst from the tenderness of it. The children noticed, of course. Samuel asked directly if Mr. Armstrong was going to be their new father, and Dorothy had to explain that it was not that simple, that she was still technically married to their father even though he was gone. "I do not want that father back," Samuel said firmly. "I like Mr. Armstrong better." "Me too," Margaret chimed in. Even Thomas nodded, though he was probably just copying his siblings. "I like him better too," Dorothy admitted. "But we have to do things properly. I need to find out if I can get a divorce, and that might take time." It took more than time. It took a trip to San Antonio with Caleb, leaving the children with the widow Patterson to consult with a lawyer. Texas law allowed for divorce in cases of abandonment, but Dorothy needed proof. She needed witnesses who could testify that Marcus had left her. "Do you have anyone who saw him leave?" the lawyer asked. "No," Dorothy said miserably. "We were traveling. There was no one around. Then we need to place an advertisement in newspapers giving him notice of the divorce petition. If he does not respond within a certain period, we can proceed without him." It seemed impossibly complicated and expensive, but Caleb quietly paid the lawyer's fees and the cost of the advertisements. "I will pay you back," Dorothy insisted. "It is not a loan," Caleb said. "Consider it an investment in our future." The process took months. Advertisements ran in newspapers across Texas and into Louisiana, where Marcus had family. There was no response. Slowly, painfully, the legal machinery ground forward. During this time, life on the ranch continued. Dorothy's garden flourished, providing fresh vegetables that were a welcome change from the usual frontier diet. The children grew taller and healthier. Jim taught Samuel to rope, and Diego taught Margaret simple Spanish words. Thomas learned to walk steadily and began speaking in full sentences. And Dorothy fell deeper in love with Caleb Armstrong. She loved the way he sang while he worked, old cowboy ballads in a surprisingly good voice. She loved his quiet competence, the way he could fix anything that broke and always seemed to know the right thing to do. She loved his kindness to her children, the way he never treated them as burdens but as individuals worth his time and attention. She loved the way he looked at her, like she was the most precious thing in his world. "I never thought I could feel this way again," she told him one evening. They were walking along the creek, which actually had water in it after a rare rainstorm. "I thought Marcus broke something in me that could not be fixed." "He did not break you," Caleb said. "He tried, but you are stronger than he ever understood. You survived, Dorothy. You saved your children and yourself. That takes more strength than most people have." "I had help," she said, squeezing his hand. "I would not have made it without you. You would have found a way, but I am grateful you did not have to." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "The lawyer sent word yesterday. The waiting period is over. If you still want the divorce, he can file the final papers." Dorothy's breath caught. This was it, the final step. Once those papers were filed, her marriage to Marcus would be legally over. She would be free. "I want it," she said firmly. "I want to close that chapter and start a new one. With me." Caleb's voice was hopeful and uncertain at the same time. "With you, if you will still have me and 3 children and all my baggage." Caleb laughed and pulled her close, kissing her properly for the first time. Not the chaste pecks they had shared before, but a real kiss full of promise and passion and love. When they finally broke apart, Dorothy was dizzy and grinning like a fool. "I will take you any way I can get you," Caleb said. "All of you, baggage and children and whatever comes with it. I love you, Dorothy Daniels. I think I have loved you since I saw you crying on the street in Del Rio." "I love you too," Dorothy whispered. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "Do not be scared. I am not going anywhere. I will be right here for as long as you want me." "Forever then," Dorothy said. "I want you forever." The divorce was finalized in early December of 1878. Dorothy received the papers declaring her marriage to Marcus Daniels dissolved due to abandonment and failure to provide support. She felt nothing but relief. Caleb proposed that same day, on one knee in the parlor of the main house with all 3 children watching. He had bought a simple gold band in San Antonio, and it fit Dorothy's finger perfectly. "Will you marry me?" he asked. "Will you be my wife and let me be a father to Samuel and Margaret and Thomas? Will you build a life with me here on this ranch?" "Yes," Dorothy said through happy tears. "Yes to all of it." The children cheered. Samuel hugged Caleb so hard he nearly knocked him over. Margaret demanded to see the ring. Thomas, not entirely sure what was happening but caught up in the excitement, clapped his hands and laughed. They were married 2 weeks later, just before Christmas, in a small ceremony at the church in Del Rio. The widow Patterson stood up with Dorothy, and Diego served as Caleb's best man. Jim watched the children during the ceremony and got misty-eyed when the preacher declared them man and wife. Dorothy wore a new dress, the first new clothing she had owned in 3 years, made of soft blue wool that Caleb had insisted on buying. Caleb wore his best suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his face shining with happiness. When the preacher said Caleb could kiss his bride, he did so tenderly, mindful of the children and the congregation, but Dorothy felt the promise of more in that kiss. Tonight would be their wedding night, the first time she had lain with a man who truly loved her, who chose her not out of obligation or convenience but out of genuine affection and desire. They had a small celebration at the ranch afterward, with food Dorothy had prepared in advance and music from Diego's guitar. The children ran around with the energy of freed prisoners, stuffed full of cake and happiness. Jim told long, rambling stories about cattle drives he had been on. The widow Patterson gossiped about town news and seemed genuinely happy for them both. As the sun set, their guests departed. Jim and Diego tactfully retired to the bunkhouse. The children, exhausted from excitement, went to bed in the cabin with barely a protest. And Dorothy and Caleb were finally alone in the main house, which was now their house, their home together. "Nervous?" Caleb asked softly. They were standing in his bedroom, which was now their bedroom, and Dorothy was indeed nervous despite being a mother 3 times over. "A little," she admitted. "This feels different from before. It matters more." "We can wait if you are not ready," Caleb said immediately. "There is no rush." But Dorothy shook her head. She had been ready for weeks, had lain awake in the cabin imagining this, wanting this. "I am ready. I want this. I want you." What followed was tender and sweet and nothing like the perfunctory couplings of her first marriage. Caleb touched her like she was precious, like he had all the time in the world, like her pleasure mattered as much as his own. He was gentle and patient and loving, and when it was over, Dorothy lay in his arms feeling cherished and whole and genuinely happy for the first time she could remember. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Caleb murmured back, his arms tightening around her. "My wife. My beautiful, strong, amazing wife." Dorothy fell asleep smiling. The next morning, Christmas Eve, Dorothy woke in the big bed in the main house and for a moment could not remember where she was. Then she felt Caleb's warmth beside her, saw the early morning light filtering through the windows, and remembered. She was married. She was safe. She was home. Caleb stirred and opened his eyes, smiling when he saw her watching him. "Good morning, Mrs. Armstrong." Dorothy tested the name silently. Dorothy Armstrong. It sounded right in a way Dorothy Daniels never had. "Good morning, husband." They lay there for a few more minutes, savoring the quiet before the day began, before the children woke and work called. Then they rose and dressed and began their first full day as a married couple. It was remarkably similar to the days before, except now, Dorothy worked in the main house instead of the cabin, and Caleb kissed her goodbye when he left for the range, and they shared a bed at night. The children moved into the main house too. Samuel and Thomas sharing one bedroom, Margaret getting the small room that had been used for storage, Dorothy and Caleb in the master bedroom. The cabin became a true guest house, which they cleaned and kept ready for the occasional visitor. The main house felt full and lived in and happy, always someone underfoot, always noise and laughter and the chaos of family life. Winter passed into spring. Dorothy's garden expanded, and she started keeping chickens for eggs. Caleb bought more cattle, growing his herd. Samuel turned 8 and began taking on real chores around the ranch. Margaret started learning to read from the books Caleb had given Dorothy. Thomas followed everyone around, wanting to be part of everything. And in March, Dorothy realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had not wanted to say anything until she was certain. When she finally told Caleb, his face lit up with such pure joy that she started crying. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Dorothy asked, though his expression made the answer obvious. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Caleb said. He dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I cannot wait to meet you." The children were equally excited when told. Samuel declared he would teach the baby everything he knew. Margaret insisted it would be a girl and began planning how they would play together. Thomas just seemed pleased that everyone else was happy. The pregnancy progressed normally. Dorothy felt sick in the mornings but otherwise well. Her body remembered what to do, settling into the familiar patterns of growing a child. Caleb was attentive without being overbearing, making sure she rested, taking over more of the heavy work, generally treating her like spun glass. "I am not fragile," Dorothy protested when he tried to carry a basket of laundry for her. "I have done this 3 times before while doing far more difficult work." "Humor me," Caleb said. "Let me take care of you. I never got to do this part before." So Dorothy let him fuss, recognizing it for what it was, love expressed through action. He brought her tea in the mornings. He rubbed her feet when they swelled. He talked to her belly every night, telling their unborn child about the ranch and the family and how loved they already were. In October of 1879, nearly 14 months after Dorothy had first arrived in Del Rio, she went into labor. The widow Patterson came to help, having delivered more babies than she could count. Jim took the children to his sister's house in town. Diego paced nervously outside. And Caleb stayed by Dorothy's side through the whole thing, holding her hand, encouraging her, refusing to leave despite the widow's suggestion that he might prefer to wait elsewhere. "This is my wife and my child," Caleb said firmly. "I am staying." The labor was faster than Dorothy's previous ones, which the widow said was normal for a 4th baby. By evening, she delivered a healthy baby boy with a powerful set of lungs and Caleb's gray eyes. "A son," Caleb said, tears running down his face as he held the tiny bundle. "We have a son." "We have 4 children," Dorothy corrected, exhausted but happy. "Samuel, Margaret, Thomas, and this little one. What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never settled on anything definite. Now Caleb looked down at the baby in his arms and said, "What about James, after my uncle who left me this ranch? James Armstrong." "James," Dorothy repeated. "Jamie. Yes, I like that." Baby Jamie was welcomed into the family with enthusiasm. Samuel was careful and gentle with him. Margaret wanted to hold him constantly. Thomas was less interested but still poked at the baby's tiny hands with fascination. The ranch hands made a fuss over him, and even the normally taciturn Jim went soft when holding the infant. Dorothy recovered quickly from the birth, her body resilient from years of hard work. Within a few weeks, she was back to her normal routine, though Caleb had hired a young woman from town to come twice a week to help with the heavier cleaning and laundry. Life settled into new rhythms. Dorothy nursed the baby and tended the children and kept the house. Caleb worked the ranch and played with the children and loved his wife. The older children thrived, growing and learning and becoming themselves. Samuel showed a real aptitude for working with horses and began helping Caleb train the young stock. Margaret developed a love of reading that rivaled Dorothy's own and could often be found curled up with a book. Thomas grew into a mischievous 4-year-old who kept everyone on their toes. And Jamie was a happy baby, quick to smile, adored by everyone. The years passed in a blur of work and love and ordinary domestic happiness. The ranch prospered. Caleb bought more land, expanded the herd, built a new barn. Dorothy's garden became legendary in the area, producing abundant vegetables that she sold in town. The children grew taller and smarter and more capable. In 1881, Dorothy became pregnant again. She was 30 years old now, and this pregnancy was harder than the last, leaving her exhausted and uncomfortable. But in March of 1882, she delivered a healthy baby girl, and Caleb was once again overwhelmed with joy. "What about Catherine?" he suggested. "After my mother, we could call her Kate." Catherine Armstrong, Dorothy said, looking down at the red-faced infant in her arms. Kate, perfect. If Jamie had been welcomed enthusiastically, Kate was absolutely adored. Margaret finally had a baby sister to dote on. Samuel was old enough at 11 to be genuinely helpful with infant care. Thomas and Jamie were fascinated by the tiny creature, and Caleb was completely smitten with his daughter. "I never knew I could love this much," he told Dorothy one night. They were lying in bed, Kate asleep in the cradle beside them, the house quiet around them. "You and the children, you are my whole world. You are ours too," Dorothy said. "I cannot imagine life without you anymore. It seems impossible that we have only been married a little over 3 years. It feels like forever in the best way. Do you ever regret it? Taking a chance on a stranger who offered you work?" Dorothy thought about the terrified woman she had been, sitting in that wagon at the edge of Del Rio with 3 hungry children and $15 to her name. She thought about all the ways her life could have gone, the disaster she had been heading toward. And then she thought about what she had instead: a loving husband, 5 healthy children, a home, security, happiness. "Not for a single second," she said. "You saved us, Caleb, you saved me." "You saved me too," Caleb replied. "I was so lonely before you came. This ranch was just a place I worked. You made it a home. You made me understand what family really means." They fell asleep holding hands the way they did every night, connected even in sleep. The years continued to unfold. Samuel grew into a strong, capable young man, taking on more and more responsibility on the ranch. At 16, he was as good a cattleman as any of the hands Caleb had hired over the years. He had his mother's dark hair and his father Marcus's height, but his steady, reliable nature was pure Caleb. Margaret became a beauty, taking after Dorothy with delicate features and expressive eyes. But more than that, she was whip-smart, devouring every book she could get her hands on. At 13, she announced her intention to become a teacher like Caleb's sisters, and Dorothy and Caleb supported her ambition wholeheartedly. Thomas, at 10, was the adventurous one, always climbing something or exploring somewhere or getting into scrapes. He kept life interesting and gave Dorothy gray hairs, but he had a good heart under all the wildness. Jamie at 5 was quiet and thoughtful, content to shadow his father and learn everything about ranching. He had already declared he wanted to be a cowboy when he grew up, just like his papa. And Kate, at 3, was a force of nature despite her small size. She was fearless and stubborn and adored, the baby of the family and everyone's darling. In the summer of 1885, the widow Patterson passed away peacefully in her sleep. It was a loss felt deeply by Dorothy, who had come to view the older woman as a surrogate mother. The widow had been a constant presence in their lives, attending every birthday, every Christmas, every significant event. Her death reminded Dorothy how precious time was, how important it was to appreciate what you had while you had it. "I want to make sure the children know their story," Dorothy told Caleb one evening. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I want them to understand how we came to be a family, how much we have to be grateful for." "They know," Caleb said. "Samuel remembers the hard times, Margaret too, though less clearly, and we have told them the story. But I want them to really understand," Dorothy insisted. "That family is not just about blood. It is about choosing each other, about commitment, about love. You chose us when you had no reason to. You could have ridden past that day in Del Rio and no one would have blamed you, but you did not. You stopped and you helped and you changed everything." Caleb pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I chose you and you chose me. That is how family works. Samuel, Margaret, and Thomas, I chose them too. They are as much my children as Jamie and Kate. I hope they know that." "They do," Dorothy assured him. Samuel asked me once if he could call you father instead of Mr. Armstrong. He was 9 and so serious about it, like he was asking for the greatest gift in the world. I remember, Caleb said softly. I remember all 3 of them started calling me father around the same time. It was the proudest moment of my life until Jamie was born. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Samuel appeared around the corner of the house. He was 17 now, tall and broad-shouldered, every inch a man grown. Father, one of the mares is foaling. I thought you would want to know. Caleb stood immediately. Let's go see. Dorothy, you want to come? I will get the children, Dorothy said. They should see this. They all gathered in the barn, even little Kate, and watched as the mare delivered a healthy filly. It was a moment of ordinary magic, the kind that filled their lives on the ranch. New life beginning, the cycle continuing, the future unfolding. Later, after the children were in bed and the barn was quiet, Dorothy and Caleb walked back to the house hand in hand. You ever think about Marcus? Caleb asked. It was the first time he had mentioned her first husband in years. Not really, Dorothy said honestly. I used to in the first year or so. I would be angry at him, or I would wonder where he was or if he ever thought about the children. But that faded. He is just someone I used to know, someone from a different life. Why do you ask? I was just thinking about how different things could have been. If he had not left you in Del Rio, we never would have met. You would still be with him, and I would still be alone. It is strange how something so terrible for you ended up being the best thing that could have happened to me. Dorothy stopped walking and turned to face him. It was the best thing for me too. I did not realize it at the time, but Marcus leaving set me free. If he had stayed, I would have spent my whole life tied to a man who did not love me, who did not value me or the children. Instead, I got you. I got this life. I got to be happy. So no, I do not think about him, except to be grateful that he had the decency to leave instead of making us all miserable for decades. Caleb kissed her, soft and sweet, the kind of kiss that still made her heart flutter even after 7 years of marriage. I love you, Dorothy Armstrong. I love you too, she replied. Now and always. The seasons turned, each one bringing its own rhythm and demands. Spring meant calving and branding and long days in the saddle. Summer brought intense heat and the constant work of maintaining water sources. Fall was roundup time, gathering the cattle, separating out those going to market. Winter was quieter but still full of daily tasks and maintenance. Through it all, the family grew closer. Meals were loud, boisterous affairs with everyone talking over each other. Evenings were spent together, the children doing lessons or playing games while Dorothy mended and Caleb worked on tack or paperwork. Sundays, they went to church in Del Rio, a family procession that turned heads and inspired smiles from the townspeople. Dorothy and Caleb Armstrong and their 5 children were a fixture of the community now, respected and liked. Dorothy had become known for her kindness, always willing to help a neighbor in need. Her garden produced a regular donation to those struggling. Caleb had a reputation as an honest rancher and fair employer, someone whose word could be trusted. The children were equally well regarded. Samuel was considered one of the finest young horsemen in the county. Margaret tutored younger children in reading, preparing for her future career. Thomas, for all his wildness, would help anyone who asked and had a particular gift for finding lost things. Jamie was the favorite of the older ranchers, who saw in him a younger version of themselves, and Kate charmed everyone she met with her fearless enthusiasm. In 1887, Samuel turned 18. It was a significant milestone, marking his transition to true adulthood. There was a party, of course, with half the county invited. Friends and neighbors gathered to celebrate, to eat Dorothy's cooking, to toast the young man's future. During the party, Caleb pulled Samuel aside. "I have something for you," he said, leading him to the barn. There in a stall stood a beautiful young stallion, 3 years old and perfectly trained. "He is yours. I know you have been wanting your own horse, not just one from the ranch string." Samuel stared at the horse, then at Caleb, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Father, I cannot accept this. He must have cost a fortune." "He is my gift to you, son. You have earned it 100 times over with your work on this ranch. Besides, I want you to have something that is truly yours." Caleb paused, then continued, "I also want you to know that this ranch will belong to you someday. You and your siblings will inherit it together, but as the oldest, I hope you will take the lead in running it." "I do not know what to say," Samuel said, his voice choked with emotion. "Say you will accept the horse and stop making an old man feel awkward," Caleb said with a smile. Samuel laughed and hugged Caleb fiercely. "Thank you, Father, for everything. For this horse, for this life, for being the father I needed. I know you are not my blood father, but you are my real father in every way that matters." "You are my son," Caleb said firmly. "Blood does not change that. I have loved you since you were 7 years old, asking me questions about cattle from the back of that wagon. I will love you until my last breath, and I am proud of the man you have become." They stood there for a moment, father and son, connected not by biology but by choice and love and years of shared life. Then they returned to the party, and Samuel showed off his new horse to much admiration. Life continued its steady progression. In 1889, Margaret left for the teaching college in San Antonio. It was the first time one of the children had left home for more than a few days, and Dorothy cried when they put her on the stage. She was 15, so young, but also so capable and determined. "She will be fine," Caleb assured Dorothy. "She is your daughter. She is strong." Margaret did more than fine. She excelled at her studies, writing long letters home about her classes and her friends and the exciting world of ideas she was discovering. She came home for holidays and summers, full of stories and new knowledge, and Dorothy and Caleb were bursting with pride. Thomas, now 14, had settled down considerably from his wild childhood. He had developed an interest in the business side of ranching, surprising everyone. He pored over Caleb's account books and asked endless questions about pricing and markets and profit margins. Caleb encouraged this, recognizing that the ranch would benefit from someone with a head for numbers. Jamie, at 10, was exactly the cowboy he had dreamed of being. He could rope and ride with the best of them, spent every possible moment with the cattle, and seemed to have an instinctive understanding of livestock. He was quiet and steady, a contrast to Thomas's energy and Samuel's intensity. And Kate, at 8, was discovering the world with unbridled enthusiasm. She wanted to do everything, try everything, learn everything. She tagged along with her brothers, demanded to be taught to ride like them, to rope like them, to do everything they could do. Dorothy saw her own determination reflected in her daughter and loved her fiercely for it. In the fall of 1890, Dorothy realized she was pregnant again. She was 36 years old, and this pregnancy was unexpected. Kate was 8, and Dorothy had assumed she was done having babies. But nature had other plans. "Are you happy about it?" she asked Caleb when she told him. "I know we had not planned for more children." "Are you asking if I am happy that we are having another baby?" Caleb said. "Dorothy, every child has been a blessing. If we are having another one, then that is another blessing. The only question is if you are happy about it." Dorothy thought about it. She was tired more easily these days, and the idea of going through pregnancy and childbirth again at her age was daunting. But underneath the practical concerns was a warm glow of joy. Another baby, another child to love, Another chance to do this thing she was good at, this raising of children into decent human beings. "I am happy," she said. Surprised but happy. The pregnancy was harder than any of the previous ones. Dorothy was exhausted constantly and suffered from back pain and swollen ankles. But the family rallied around her. Samuel and Thomas took over many of her household tasks. Margaret came home from college for an extended visit to help. Kate, young as she was, tried to be useful. Jamie, in his quiet way, brought his mother small gifts: wildflowers, smooth stones from the creek, anything he thought might make her smile. And Caleb was endlessly patient, endlessly supportive, endlessly loving. He rubbed her back when it ached. He brought her breakfast in bed on particularly difficult mornings. He talked to her belly, just like he had with Kate, telling the baby about the family waiting to meet them. In April of 1891, Dorothy went into labor. The birth was long and difficult, the hardest she had experienced. There were moments when she was genuinely frightened, when she thought something was going wrong. But the midwife who had replaced the widow Patterson was capable and calm, and Caleb never left her side. And eventually, exhausted and drained, Dorothy delivered a healthy baby boy. "Another son," Caleb said, cradling the infant with the practiced ease of a father who had done this before. "What should we name him?" Dorothy was too tired to think clearly. "You choose," she murmured. "William," Caleb said after a moment. "After my father, William Armstrong. Willie." "Willie," Dorothy repeated. "I like it." The family met their newest member with varying reactions. Samuel, now 21 and very much an adult, was amused to have an infant brother again. Margaret, home from college for the birth, was enchanted. Thomas was practical, already calculating how this would change household dynamics. Jamie was curious, studying the baby like an interesting specimen. And Kate was delighted, immediately appointing herself Willie's primary guardian and protector. Dorothy recovered slowly from the birth, more slowly than before. She was tired in a way that went bone deep, and Caleb insisted she rest and let others handle the work. Margaret stayed home from college for the remainder of the term to help, and a young woman from town was hired full-time to assist with the house and children. "I am supposed to be taking care of everyone," Dorothy protested weakly, when Caleb brought her tea in bed yet again. "You have been taking care of everyone for years," Caleb said firmly. "Now it is our turn to take care of you. Rest, Dorothy, heal. Your family will still be here when you are ready." So Dorothy rested, and slowly her strength returned. By the time Willie was 3 months old, she was back to her normal activities, though with more help than before. The hired girl, a sweet young woman named Annie, stayed on permanently, and Dorothy learned to delegate tasks she had always done herself. Life settled into new patterns once again. Willie grew from infant to toddler, a happy child who seemed to smile constantly. Samuel began courting a young woman from town, the daughter of the general store owner. Margaret finished college and accepted a teaching position in Del Rio, choosing to stay near family rather than seek opportunities in the city. Thomas surprised everyone by announcing he wanted to attend business school and learn proper accounting and management. "The ranch is doing well," he explained at dinner one night. "But it could do better with proper business practices. I want to learn how to do that so I can help Father manage things more efficiently." Caleb was supportive, of course, and in the fall of 1893, Thomas left for Austin to attend business school. He was 17, ready for the adventure, and Dorothy cried again seeing another child leave home. "They are growing up," she told Caleb that night. "Soon they will all be gone, off living their own lives." "Not all of them," Caleb said, gesturing to where Jamie and Kate and Willie were playing a game in the parlor. "And the ones who leave will come back. Samuel is not going anywhere. Margaret chose to stay close. Thomas will come back too, I wager, once he has his education. This is their home, Dorothy. They might wander, but they will always come back. He was right. Samuel married his sweetheart in 1894, and they built a house on the ranch property, close enough to the main house that Samuel could continue working the cattle. His wife, a practical woman named Lucy, fit into the family easily. Margaret lived in town during the school year, but spent every weekend and holiday at the ranch. And Thomas, after finishing his business education, came home and began implementing new practices that increased the ranch's profitability significantly. The years flowed by like water in the creek, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, but always moving forward. The children grew and changed. Samuel and Lucy had their first baby in 1896, making Dorothy and Caleb grandparents. Margaret married a fellow teacher in 1898 and began her own family. Thomas married a banker's daughter and seemed poised to become quite successful in his own right, though he remained committed to helping manage the ranch. Jamie, at 18 in 1899, was still firmly committed to the ranching life, working alongside Caleb and Samuel, learning everything about running the operation. And Kate, at 16, had become a stunning young woman who reminded Dorothy painfully of herself at that age, full of determination and fire and dreams. Willie, at 8, was the baby still, though he hated being called that. He was bright and funny and affectionate, adored by his older siblings and nieces and nephews. In the spring of 1900, Dorothy turned 46. It seemed impossible that so much time had passed, that she had been on this ranch for nearly 22 years, that she had been married to Caleb for over 21 years. But the gray in her hair and the lines on her face told the story of those years, as did the grown children and grandchildren surrounding her. "You ever miss Missouri?" Caleb asked one evening. They were sitting on the porch, a favorite habit that had endured over the decades. "Your old home?" "No," Dorothy said without hesitation. "This is my home. This ranch, this family, you. Everything that mattered to me from before is either gone or here with me now. I cannot even remember what that girl from Missouri dreamed about. I am sure it was nothing like this life, but I would not trade this life for anything." "Even the hard parts?" Caleb asked. "The struggles, the fears, the times when we did not know if we would make it, especially the hard parts," Dorothy said. "They made the good parts sweeter. They taught us what we were capable of. I was so scared when Marcus left me in Del Rio. I thought my life was over, that I had failed at everything. But that moment of despair led me to you, to this family, to everything good I have now. So yes, even the hard parts." Caleb took her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis that was beginning to trouble his fingers. "I love you, Dorothy Armstrong. I have loved you for 22 years, and I will love you for however many more we get." "I love you too," Dorothy said. "Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for seeing me, for helping me, for loving me and my children. Thank you for building this life with me." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the land they had worked and loved and made their own. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of their family. Grandchildren laughing, Samuel calling to the hands, Margaret's voice as she read a story to Willie. It was the sound of home, of love, of a life well lived. As the years continued forward into the new century, the ranch thrived under the combined efforts of Caleb, Samuel, Thomas, and Jamie. What had started as a modest cattle operation had grown into one of the most successful ranches in the region. The Armstrong name was respected throughout South Texas, known for quality livestock and fair dealing. Samuel proved to be a natural cattleman, taking over more and more of the daily operations as Caleb aged. He and Lucy had 3 children by 1902, and Samuel was raising them the way he had been raised, with love and hard work and strong values. He often told his own children the story of how Caleb had saved their grandmother and how that one act of kindness had created this entire family. Margaret became one of the most beloved teachers in Del Rio, known for her patience and her ability to reach even the most difficult students. She had 2 children and a happy marriage, and she always credited her education and opportunities to Dorothy and Caleb's unwavering support of her dreams. Thomas's business acumen proved invaluable. He modernized the ranch's record-keeping, negotiated better prices for their cattle, and established relationships with buyers that ensured steady markets. He and his wife had 4 children and lived in a fine house in town. Though Thomas spent most of his working hours at the ranch, Jamie, quiet and steady as ever, became the soul of the ranching operation. He had an almost supernatural ability with cattle and horses, able to gentle the wildest bronc and calm the most skittish steer. He married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring county in 1903, and they built a house on the ranch property near Samuel's. His wife, Maria, was half Mexican and brought her own family's ranching traditions into the Armstrong operation, enriching it further. Kate, to everyone's surprise and delight, became a horse breeder. She had always loved horses, and as she grew older, she developed a keen eye for bloodlines and conformation. She convinced Caleb to let her start a small breeding program, focusing on sturdy ranch horses. By 1904, at 21, she was selling horses to ranches across South Texas and making a name for herself in the industry. She eventually married one of her customers, a young rancher from San Antonio, but she kept her breeding operation at the Armstrong Ranch, unwilling to leave the land she loved. Willie, the baby of the family, grew into a thoughtful young man with his father's quiet kindness and his mother's determination. In 1905, at 14, he announced he wanted to be a veterinarian, having developed a deep love for animals. Dorothy and Caleb, true to form, supported this dream and began planning how to finance his education. Through all of these years, Dorothy and Caleb remained the heart of the family. Their home was the gathering place for Sunday dinners, holidays, and celebrations. Their marriage was the model their children used for their own relationships. Their story was the foundation narrative of the Armstrong family. In 1906, Caleb turned 53 and Dorothy turned 52. They were both graying, both moving a bit slower, both showing the wear of decades of hard work. But they were also happy, surrounded by children and grandchildren, secure in their love and their life together. One evening that summer, after a particularly large family dinner celebrating Jamie's 25th birthday, Dorothy and Caleb found themselves alone on the porch again. The sounds of family had faded as everyone headed home or to bed, and the night was quiet except for the usual ranch sounds. "Do you remember when it was just us and 3 frightened children?" Dorothy asked. "When this house felt too big and too empty. I remember thinking I had never seen anything as beautiful as you trying so hard not to cry in that wagon," Caleb said. "I remember deciding in that instant that I was going to help you, whatever it took. Did you ever imagine it would turn into this? All of these children and grandchildren, this whole sprawling family?" "No," Caleb admitted. "I hoped you might stay, that we might build something together, but I could not have imagined how wonderful it would actually be. I could not have imagined how much I would love you, how complete you would make my life." Dorothy leaned against him, fitting into his side the way she had done for 28 years. "I was so broken when you found me. I thought I was beyond repair, beyond hope, but you saw something in me worth saving." "You were never broken," Caleb said. "Bent, maybe, hurt, certainly. but not broken. You were the strongest person I had ever met. You just did not know it yet. You saved yourself, Dorothy. You saved those children. I just gave you a safe place to do it." "We saved each other," Dorothy said. "You were lonely, I was desperate. We both needed what the other could give. And look what we built from that need. Look at this family, this life. It is more than I ever dreamed possible." They sat in silence for a while, holding hands, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. A horse nickered softly in the corral. The wind rustled through the mesquite trees. "I want you to know," Caleb said eventually, "that these years with you have been the best of my life. Every single day, even the hard ones, has been a gift because I got to spend it with you. You made me understand what love really means, what family really means. You gave me purpose and joy and a reason to wake up every morning grateful to be alive." Dorothy felt tears prick her eyes. After all these years, Caleb could still move her to tears with his words. "You gave me the same," she said. "You gave me a life I did not think I deserved. You loved my children as your own. You gave me more children. You built a home with me. You are the best man I have ever known, Caleb Armstrong, and I thank God every day that you stopped to help a desperate woman on the street in Del Rio." "It was the best decision I ever made," Caleb said. "The best day of my life until our wedding day." "And all the days after," Dorothy added. "And all the days after," Caleb agreed. The years continued to pass, bringing the usual joys and sorrows of life. Grandchildren grew and new ones arrived. The ranch continued to prosper. The family remained close, bound by love and shared history. In 1910, when Dorothy was 56 and Caleb was 57, they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary with a huge party. All of their children and grandchildren gathered, along with what seemed like half the county. There were speeches and toasts, stories shared and memories relived. Samuel stood up and told the story of that day in Del Rio, of a cowboy who stopped to help when he did not have to, of a mother who had the courage to trust a stranger. "Everything we have, everything we are, comes from that moment," Samuel said. "From one man's kindness and one woman's bravery. I am proud to be your son, Father, even if we do not share blood. And Mother, you are the strongest person I know. Thank you both for building this family, for showing us what love and commitment really mean." There was not a dry eye in the house. Later, when the party had wound down and the guests had left, Dorothy and Caleb found themselves in their bedroom, exhausted but happy. "30 years," Dorothy said wonderingly. "It went so fast. And yet it feels like I have known you forever," Caleb said. "Like you have always been part of my life." "I cannot imagine life without you," Dorothy said. "I do not want to imagine it." "Then do not," Caleb said, pulling her close. "We have right now tonight, and that is enough. We will take the future as it comes together." They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had done for 30 years, as they would continue to do for as long as they were both alive. The following years brought changes, as years always do. Willie left for veterinary school in 1911, the last of the children to leave home. The house felt quieter without him, though it was still often full of visiting children and grandchildren. Dorothy missed the daily chaos of child rearing, but also appreciated the quieter pace of life. Caleb's arthritis worsened, making it harder for him to do the physical labor he had always done. He slowly ceded more control of the ranch to Samuel and Jamie, transitioning into an advisory role. It was hard for him to step back, to watch others do the work he had done for decades, but he handled it with grace. Dorothy developed her own health issues, her joints aching in the cold weather, her energy not what it once was. But she remained active, tending a smaller garden, cooking when she felt up to it, always the center of the family gatherings. In the spring of 1915, Dorothy turned 61 and Caleb turned 62. They had been married for 35 years, together for nearly 37. Their hair was white now, their faces deeply lined, their bodies showing the wear of hard lives lived fully. One evening in late May, they sat on the porch as usual, watching the sunset. The routine had not changed in all the years they had lived here. This was their time, their moment of peace at the end of each day. "You ever regret not having more adventures?" Dorothy asked suddenly. "Not traveling or seeing the world beyond this ranch," Caleb thought about it. "No," he said finally. "This ranch, this family, that has been my adventure. Watching the children grow, building something lasting, loving you for all these years. What adventure could be greater than that?" "I feel the same," Dorothy said. "I have everything I ever wanted right here, more than I ever dared to dream when I was younger." "We did well," Caleb said with satisfaction. "We built something good, something that will last beyond us. The children will carry it on and their children after them. The Armstrong Ranch will be here long after we are gone." "That is a comforting thought," Dorothy said. "That our legacy will continue, that all the work and love we put into this place will endure." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear Samuel calling instructions to one of the hands. The sound of family, of life continuing, of the future unfolding. As darkness fell, Caleb stood and offered Dorothy his hand. "Come to bed, my love. Tomorrow is another day and I want to spend it with you." Dorothy took his hand and let him help her up, her joints protesting but her heart light. They walked into the house together, hand in hand, as they had done for 37 years. That night, Dorothy had trouble sleeping. She lay awake listening to Caleb's steady breathing, thinking about their life together, about all the moments that had led them here. She thought about that terrified woman in the wagon, about the cowboy who had stopped to help, about the leap of faith she had taken in accepting his offer. She thought about the children she had raised, both the ones she had brought to the ranch and the ones she had born here. She thought about the grandchildren who called this place home, who would carry the Armstrong name and the Armstrong values into the future. She thought about love, real love, the kind that endured through hard times and good times, the kind that grew deeper with years instead of fading. The kind of love she had found with Caleb, unexpected and precious and absolutely transformative. As dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, Dorothy finally drifted off to sleep, a smile on her face, Caleb's hand in hers. The years that followed were gentle ones. Dorothy and Caleb settled into comfortable old age, surrounded by their growing family. By 1920, they had 15 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren, with more on the way. The ranch prospered under Samuel and Jamie's management, with Thomas handling all the business aspects and Kate's horse breeding program becoming renowned across the state. Willie finished his veterinary training and returned to Del Rio, setting up a practice that served all the ranches in the area. He married a local girl, a doctor's daughter, and they built a house in town but spent most weekends at the ranch. His veterinary skills proved invaluable to the family business, keeping their livestock healthy and their horses in top condition. Dorothy's health had its ups and downs, but she remained mentally sharp and emotionally engaged with her family. She loved hosting the Sunday dinners that had become tradition, loved seeing the table crowded with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Caleb joked that they needed a bigger dining room, but Dorothy said she liked the crowding, liked the noise and chaos and life. In the summer of 1922, Dorothy turned 68 and Caleb turned 69. They had been married for 42 years, together for nearly 44. They were among the oldest couples in Del Rio, their enduring marriage a source of inspiration to younger couples. That fall, Caleb developed a persistent cough that would not go away. Willie examined him and looked worried, but Caleb brushed off concerns. "I am just getting old," he said. Nothing to worry about. But the cough worsened, and by winter, Caleb was seriously ill. The doctor diagnosed pneumonia and prescribed bed rest, which Caleb hated but followed because Dorothy insisted. For weeks, he fought the illness, his strong constitution battling the infection. Dorothy barely left his side. She sat by his bed, reading to him, talking to him, holding his hand. The children visited constantly, bringing grandchildren and great-grandchildren to cheer him up. The house was never empty, always someone there keeping vigil. In late January of 1923, Caleb seemed to improve. His fever broke, his breathing eased, and the doctor pronounced him on the mend. Dorothy allowed herself to hope, to believe they would have more years together. But on February 3rd, Caleb suffered a sudden relapse. His fever spiked, his breathing became labored, and despite everyone's best efforts, it was clear he was dying. The family gathered, filling the house, saying their goodbyes to the man who had been their rock, their foundation, their example of what a good man should be. Dorothy sat by his bed, holding his hand, refusing to leave even when the children urged her to rest. "I have been by his side for 44 years, she said. "I am not leaving now." As dawn broke on February 4th, Caleb opened his eyes and looked at Dorothy. His breathing was shallow, his face pale, but his eyes were clear and full of love. "Dorothy," he whispered. "I am here," she said, squeezing his hand. "I am right here." "Best day of my life," he said with difficulty. "When I saw you in that wagon, best decision I ever made, no regrets." "No regrets," Dorothy echoed, tears streaming down her face. "I love you, Caleb Armstrong. I have loved you for 44 years, and I will love you for the rest of my life." "Love you too," Caleb breathed. "Always tell the children, tell them I am proud. Tell them to take care of each other, to keep the family strong." "I will," Dorothy promised. "They know, but I will tell them." Caleb's eyes drifted closed, then opened again. "You made me so happy, such a good life, thank you," Dorothy said. "Thank you for saving me, for loving me, for giving me this beautiful life." Caleb smiled, that transformative smile she had loved from the very beginning. "Not goodbye," he whispered. "Just until later." "Until later," Dorothy agreed. Caleb took one more shallow breath, squeezed Dorothy's hand weakly, and then he was gone. Just like that, after 69 years of life and 42 years of marriage, Caleb Armstrong passed peacefully from the world, surrounded by love. Dorothy sat there for a long time, holding his hand, memorizing his face one last time. Around her, the family wept, but Dorothy was dry-eyed, in shock perhaps, or simply unable to process the magnitude of her loss. Eventually, Samuel gently led her away so they could tend to his father's body. Dorothy let herself be led, moving like a sleepwalker, her mind unable to fully grasp that Caleb was gone. The funeral was held 3 days later. It seemed like everyone in Del Rio and half of South Texas attended. Caleb had been well loved, well respected, and the outpouring of grief and support was overwhelming. People spoke of his kindness, his honesty, his generosity. They told stories of times he had helped them, advice he had given, examples he had set. Samuel gave the eulogy, his voice steady despite his tears. "My father was not a perfect man," he said. "But he was a good man, the best man I have ever known. He taught me what it means to be a father, not through biology but through choice and commitment and daily acts of love. He saved my mother and my siblings and me when we had nothing and no one. He gave us a home, a family, a future. And he did it simply because it was the right thing to do, because he saw people in need and he had the ability to help. That was who he was. A man who helped. A man who loved. A man who built instead of tore down, who gave instead of took, who made the world better simply by being in it. I will miss him every day for the rest of my life, but I will also carry his lessons with me, and I will try to be the kind of man he was. We all will. That will be his legacy, not just this ranch, but the values he instilled in all of us. There was not a dry eye in the church. They buried Caleb in the small cemetery outside Del Rio, on a hill overlooking the town and the surrounding countryside. Dorothy stood at the grave, supported by her children, as they lowered her husband into the ground. She still had not cried, not really, and everyone was worried about her. After the funeral, after the reception, after the last guest had left and the house was finally quiet, Dorothy went to the bedroom she had shared with Caleb for 42 years. She sat on the edge of the bed, looking at his side, still rumpled from his final illness, and finally, the tears came. She wept for the man she had loved, for the life they had shared, for the future they would not have together. She wept for herself, for the loneliness she knew was coming, for the empty space beside her in bed. She wept until she had no tears left, until she was exhausted and hollow and aching. And then, because she was Dorothy Armstrong and she had never been one to give up, she dried her eyes and began to figure out how to live without him. The months after Caleb's death were the hardest of Dorothy's life, harder even than when Marcus had abandoned her. Then, she had been young and resilient and had the children to focus on. Now, she was 68 years old, tired to her bones, and the man who had been her partner and lover and best friend for 44 years was gone. The family tried to be supportive. Samuel suggested she move in with him and Lucy. Margaret wanted her to come to town and live near her. Thomas offered to build her a house in Del Rio proper where she would have neighbors and company, but Dorothy refused all of it. "This is my home," she said. "Mine and Caleb's. I am not leaving it." So she stayed in the ranch house, though she moved to one of the smaller bedrooms because she could not bear to sleep in the bed she had shared with Caleb. The children visited constantly, never leaving her alone for long. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren came by frequently, filling the house with noise and life. Slowly, painfully, Dorothy learned to live in a world without Caleb. She tended her garden, though it was smaller now and less ambitious. She still hosted Sunday dinners, though Lucy or Margaret did most of the cooking. She rocked great-grandchildren and listened to grandchildren's problems and offered the wisdom of her years. But there was a sadness in her now that had not been there before, a quiet grief that colored everything. She missed Caleb with an ache that never fully went away. She missed his presence, his voice, his hand in hers. She missed the conversations on the porch, the comfortable silences, the absolute certainty that someone loved her completely. She found herself talking to him sometimes, late at night when no one else was around. She told him about the grandchildren, about ranch business, about her day. She imagined his responses, what he would say, what advice he would give. It helped a little to pretend he was still there. A year after Caleb's death, Dorothy turned 69. The family threw a party, trying to lift her spirits, and Dorothy tried to be happy for their sake. But as she looked around at all the faces, all the family that she and Caleb had created together, she felt his absence like a physical pain. That night, after everyone had left, Dorothy sat on the porch in her usual spot. She looked at the empty chair beside her, Caleb's chair, and felt the tears come again. "I miss you," she whispered to the darkness. "I miss you so much it hurts. I do not know how to do this without you." A breeze stirred the mesquite trees, and Dorothy imagined it was Caleb's answer. "You are strong. You can do this. You are not alone." "I am tired," she told the empty air. "I am tired of being strong, tired of going on without you. I want to rest." But she did not rest, not yet. The family needed her, she told herself. The great-grandchildren needed their great-grandmother. The Sunday dinners needed their matriarch. She had a role to play still, a purpose to fulfill. So she kept going, day after day, week after week, month after month. She tended her garden and attended church and hosted dinners. She cuddled babies and advised teenagers and listened to her adult children's concerns. She was Dorothy Armstrong, and even without Caleb, she was still herself. The years passed. Dorothy's health gradually declined, her body wearing out after nearly 7 decades of hard use. She moved more slowly, tired more easily, needed more help with daily tasks. But her mind remained sharp, and her love for her family never wavered. By 1927, Dorothy was 73 years old. She had 22 grandchildren and 11 great-grandchildren. The ranch continued to prosper under Samuel and Jamie's management, now with the 4th generation beginning to take an interest in the operation. The Armstrong name was synonymous with quality cattle and honest dealing throughout South Texas. In the spring of that year, Dorothy became seriously ill. What started as a simple cold developed into pneumonia, the same illness that had taken Caleb 4 years earlier. Willie did everything he could, but Dorothy's body was simply worn out. As she lay in bed, drifting in and out of consciousness, the family gathered once again. Her children sat by her bedside, holding her hands, telling her they loved her. Her grandchildren filled the house, keeping vigil. Her great-grandchildren, too young to understand, played quietly. On a warm evening in late May. Dorothy opened her eyes to find Samuel sitting beside her, looking so much like Caleb that it made her heart ache. "Mama," he said softly. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," Dorothy whispered. "So tired, Samuel." "You can rest," Samuel said, tears in his eyes. "You have earned your rest. We will be fine. You built us strong, you and Father. We will take care of each other." "Promise me," Dorothy said, her voice barely audible. "Promise me you will keep the family together. That you will love each other, take care of each other." "I promise," Samuel said. "We all promise. You do not need to worry about us." Dorothy smiled. "I am proud of you," she said. "All of you. You turned out so well, better than I ever could have hoped." "Because we had you and Father showing us the way," Samuel said. "Teaching us what family means, what love means." "It was worth it," Dorothy breathed. "All of it. The struggles, the fears, the hard times. It was all worth it to have this family, this life." "Mama," Samuel said, his voice breaking. "I love you. Love you too," Dorothy whispered. "Love all of you so much." She closed her eyes, exhausted from even that brief conversation. In her mind, she was young again, standing on a street in Del Rio with 3 frightened children and no hope. She saw a cowboy riding toward her, saw him stop and dismount, saw him offer help when he had no reason to. She saw all the years that followed, compressed into images. Wedding day, babies born, children growing, family dinners, quiet evenings on the porch. She saw Caleb's face, young and old, always looking at her with love, and then, impossibly, she saw Caleb himself. Not a memory, but truly him, standing at the foot of her bed, smiling that transformative smile, holding out his hand. "Time to go, Dorothy," he said. "I have been waiting for you." "I am ready," Dorothy whispered, though she was not sure if she spoke aloud or only in her mind. She felt herself drifting, lighter than air, free from pain and weariness. She heard Samuel calling her name, heard crying, but it was distant, unimportant. What mattered was Caleb's hand in hers, pulling her forward, bringing her home. Dorothy Armstrong died peacefully on May 28, 1927, at the age of 73, surrounded by the family she had created with Caleb, leaving behind a legacy of love and strength that would endure for generations. They buried her next to Caleb on the hill overlooking Del Rio. The entire town attended the funeral, along with ranchers from across South Texas, all coming to pay respects to a woman who had embodied grace and resilience and unwavering love. Margaret gave the eulogy this time, her voice steady despite her grief. My mother was only 24 when she arrived in Del Rio with 3 young children and $15 to her name, she said. She was abandoned, desperate, and terrified, but she was also strong, though she did not know it yet. She had the courage to accept help from a stranger, the wisdom to recognize genuine kindness when she saw it, and the strength to build a new life from the ashes of the old one. She could have become bitter after what my birth father did to her. She could have let that betrayal poison her, turn her hard and cold. But she did not. She opened her heart to love again to my father Caleb, and together they built something beautiful. This family, this ranch, this legacy of love and commitment and putting family first. She taught us that family is not about blood. It is about choice. It is about showing up every day and doing the work of loving each other. She taught us that hard times do not have to break you, that you can survive anything if you have people who love you. She taught us grace and strength, and how to keep going even when everything seems impossible. And most importantly, she taught us what real love looks like. Not the fairy tale kind, but the kind that endures through decades, that grows deeper with time, that sustains you through the hard times. The kind of love she and my father had, the kind we all aspire to in our own marriages. She lived a long, full life, and she died knowing she was loved and that her legacy would continue through all of us. We will miss her every day, but we will honor her by being the family she raised us to be, by loving each other the way she loved us, by passing down her values to our children and grandchildren. Rest well, Mama. You earned it, and thank you for everything. We would not be who we are without you. There was not a dry eye in the cemetery. As the years passed, the Armstrong family continued to thrive, always remembering the story of how they came to be. Samuel told his grandchildren about the day a desperate woman in a wagon caught a lonely cowboy's attention. Margaret taught her students about resilience using her mother's story as an example. Thomas incorporated the values he learned from Dorothy and Caleb into his business practices. Jamie passed down the ranching knowledge, but also the emphasis on family and kindness. Kate told her children about the grandmother who had survived abandonment to build something beautiful. And Willie, in his work, showed the compassion that both Dorothy and Caleb had modeled. The ranch remained in the family for generations, each new generation adding to the legacy while honoring the foundation that Dorothy and Caleb had built. The story became family legend, told at gatherings, passed down carefully so it would never be forgotten. They had proved that sometimes the worst moments in life can lead to the best ones, that kindness matters, that love endures, and that family is what you make it. And every Sunday, when the Armstrong family gathered for dinner at the ranch, someone would inevitably tell the story again, of the abandoned woman and the lonely cowboy who said, "I have room for all," and how that one moment of kindness changed everything. It was a story with a happy ending, the kind both Dorothy and Caleb would have been proud of, a testament to the life they built together and the love that sustained them through 44 years of marriage and beyond. Their love story became the foundation of a family that would endure for generations, all because one cowboy stopped to help when he did not have to, and one woman had the courage to trust again. And that, truly, was the greatest legacy of all.